This man has bought more than 50 used TW200s and has brought more T-Dub performance products to market than anyone. Just what does he look for when he's buying a used T-Dub? Stick around to find out. Hey folks, this is B-Dub on a T-Dub. I really appreciate you tuning back into the channel. So I've got a very special video to bring you today. So we are at the 3rd annual Northwoods T-Dub Fun Run in Crandon, Wisconsin. So if you want to learn anything more about that event for the future, if you look us up on Facebook, you can join the group and get all the sorts of details. So with me is a very special guest that if you're a T-Dubber and you have tried to look into modifying your bike, or you have modified your bike, you likely know my guest. So Brad Covington, the man behind Bradley Performance. Brad, I certainly appreciate you making a long trek up from Arkansas with Tater again this year to ride with us and show us some of the cool products that you're bringing to market. So I've asked Brad if he could kind of do a little Q&A on buying a used TW. So Brad, I guess first question, when would you guess that you got your first TW?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We had a good trek up. It's about 13 hours for us. It's not bad, but anyway, I would say, I don't know when I bought my first one, but it was like a lot of people, probably back in the 2000s.
Okay.
You know, the bike was probably already 15, 20 years old. Yep. When I first saw one. You know, they're kind of rare. A lot of people have never seen one, never heard of one, still to this day. And how old is it, 35 years or something?
Yeah, 40 I think, but yeah.
And so anyway, I came across one back in the 2000s. What in the world is that? And I've been in power sports my whole life. Had power sports salvage yards and dealerships and repair facilities, and then have, you know, raced and all these things. And I had never come across a TW. I thought, what in the world is that? And anyway, so, but like everybody else, you dig and learn and
Yep.
and research, and so we have a little farm. You've been there.
Yep.
And I thought, boy, that is the perfect, you know, farm bike. And so we bought one, and then we bought another one, and then I, you know, give that one to my brother, buy myself another one, you know, that type of deal. And the herd grows, you know. So as I've told you before, I worked for a manufacturing company, and so I had the ability to, you know, develop some products, you know, on their dime while I was at work, you know, using the CAD machines and laser cutters and press brakes and all these things. And so I started building some parts for our T-Dubs that we were using on the farm. So, you know, that was kind of the initial dive into
Sure.
the T-Dub world for us, but that's before I knew there was a cult or all these things.
Yeah, awesome. And I think it's been, what, it was like 2022 or so you officially started Bradley Performance Products?
Yeah, in 2022.
Okay.
I would say I built the first fat tire kit, I think it was in 2009.
Wow, okay.
So there were several, you know, a lot of time went by there where I wasn't doing anything as far as manufacturing or selling any product.
Right.
I was just doing it for myself.
Right.
But
Cool.
yeah.
So how many used T-Dubs would you take a stab that you've bought over the years?
Well, you know, just to try to, I don't know, but try to maybe just lump some stuff together. There's probably always maybe 20 T-Dubs at the shop.
Okay.
And that's turning over. And I would say we've probably had maybe 50 or 60, you know. Sometimes, you know, we need to buy T-Dubs, and people come through and visit the shop, and they say, why do you have all these? Well, it's because every one of these bikes has a different prototype part on it that we're testing. And so that's why, you know,
Yeah.
every time I go out, I really need to make myself get on a different one to go test that part.
So what I'd like to do is pick your brain a little bit, and obviously you're far above average when it comes to mechanical skills and aptitude and that type of thing, but without going into ultra detail, so for an average guy who's looking to buy a used T-Dub, you know, what are some of the things? Obviously they're pretty bulletproof, but you know, as a educated buyer, obviously, what are the things that you'd recommend somebody pay attention to? I'm sure there's some basics, but there's probably a few others as well. But
yeah. So, you know, I would say that it's pretty rare for us to see a just destroyed T-dub. I don't know why that is specifically, but it is rare.
Okay.
They're generally, you know, they've got some age on them, and they're generally in good shape overall. You know, they usually have the original tires on them. You know, and you know why. So they're usually in good shape, but it's to the point that condition is everything. You know, I had a used car dealership, and so the same thing applies. You know, the miles doesn't necessarily kill one. You know, doesn't kill the value of the bike. You know, conditions everything. So, if you're going to get into riding one and you're looking to buy one, yeah, you don't want to get taken, you know, on your first one, and so you do need to be able to, you know, investigate, look the bike over really well, and very similar to like a airplane, for example. The logbooks is the whole value of the airplane. So if you find a nice, clean airplane with no logs, it's trash. You can't do anything with it except tear it down and sell it for parts. The 100% of the value of the airplane is in the logbooks. So it's in the records.
Yep.
And these days, it's not as bad for cars, but it's similar. It's the Carfax, and it's the record keeping. Because if a car is bought new and the oil is changed by the reminder on the dash, then that means the oil's getting changed every, 8,000 miles now? Well, the engine is only going to last to warranty, and that's it. It's not going to be a 1,000,000-mile car because the oil was going too long, you know, for the first 100,000 miles. If somebody buys a new car and they're changing it every 3,000, it will be a 1,000,000-mile car, you know. And so, but it's the record of that, you know.
So maintenance records on a Tita would be pretty key.
And it would be amazing. It would drastically increase the value if there were maintenance records, if you were buying from the original owner, you know. And I see, you wouldn't believe how many owner's manuals I pick up, you know, and just quickly, I don't need another owner's manual, but, you know, flip through it. And in the back, they wrote down their mileage and their oil changes and what they used and what brand filter and all these things, and when they replaced the chain and when they replaced this and that and the other. And so there's a lot of value there. You know, it wouldn't bother me to buy a 15,000-mile T-dub if the records were there and the conditions there.
Sure.
So that's where the value's at.
Okay. So I'm assuming, you know, like if I'm buying a used something, I'm looking at the oil condition, obviously the oil level, and an air filter probably. I guess, are there any things as far as bearings or wear items or things that are particularly expensive to fix, or you know, I guess what horror stories have you run into with you know, is anything where you went and saying, I know that's going to be a problem, but I can fix it, or I didn't see that one coming. I guess what particular things might sneak up on the average Joe? Yeah.
So, you know that probably one of the most expensive individual pieces is going to be a pair of tires. And tires have dates on them. You know, they have the DOT number, and then and that includes the date of manufacturing.
It's usually the last two digits? The
last two digits of your DOT number is the year it was manufactured. So the vast majority of T-dubs, I mean, yeah, you're buying and selling some late model T-dubs, but there's so many survivors. Sure. You know, a huge percentage of them are still going. You know, I see a lot of 87s still for sale, and they have the original tires on them. You know, and so that's an issue. Would be the age of the tires, and it's because of dry rot, weather cracking, and that's what causes them to blow out. Okay. You know, it's not you know, incorrect air pressure or, you know, a bad wear or something like that. It's the dry rot and the dry weather cracking that causes them to fail. So
you mentioned 87. I don't know the details, but there's kind of some problematic electrical issues specific to the 87. Can you maybe briefly touch on that?
So these bikes have, from 88 up, they have a stator in the flywheel of the motor that makes AC voltage, and that AC voltage comes to the rectifier regulator and gets converted to DC, and then the rest of the bike is all DC. in '87, it was a one-off. It was the first year,
Yep.
and it's the only year the stator was also DC. And so the CDI box is different. The wiring harness is different. Every electrical component is different, and those parts have been out of manufacturing for a long time.
Okay.
So you can't buy them new. You can't find them used. I generally steer clear of 87s.
For that reason, eh?
I will buy them for the parts.
Okay.
You know, we'll buy an old 87 that is really to the point it needs to be tore down because we need engine cases or whatever it is, and we'll tear them down. But I wouldn't buy one that you're going to keep and enjoy and put money in because of the electrical system differences.
Okay. As far as mechanical, I guess which bearings do you see going out on them the earliest? Maybe touch on that.
Yeah, none.
Okay.
No, they're just so reliable. We mentioned the tires, and yes, you mentioned oil. You know, and since we're talking about oil change intervals, when should you change the oil? It's not hours, it's not miles, it's color. Change it when it starts getting dark. You know what I mean? Oil is that amber color, and it'll stay that way for quite a while. And when it starts getting, you know, when it's chocolate, it's a little too far. You know,
Yep.
so when it starts getting dark, then you know you have particles in suspense. That's what makes it dark,
Yep.
and those particles are getting circulated, you know, through all your components. So yeah, change it when it starts getting dark. And so for us, if you are somebody that's really hard on a clutch, a lot of what's suspended in the oil, a lot of the material that you're seeing that makes it dark is clutch material. And so if you ride one, maybe the way I ride one that's pretty hard and pretty aggressive in the woods, it doesn't take long to put some clutch material in the oil. So I'm changing the oil every, you know, we go to these rides.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that oil will only get used for that ride because it's going to be dark when we get back.
Yeah. So if you've seen some of my past videos, you know I bought a couple of T-dubs a couple of months ago at an online auction, and one of them, the 06, at slow speed on pavement, it was pulling. So I talked to Brad, and you said it's not uncommon for you to find one with a bent fork. I guess how would you know that? And what's the fix if you run into that?
Yeah. So actually, believe it or not, when I bought this bike, I bought it with one bent fork leg or bent fork tube. And so, yes, matter of fact, one of these late model bikes was the same way. Being 33 millimeter tubes, they're pretty robust, but you know, they're not designed to, you know, to take a crash and stay straight. You know, something's got to give. Otherwise, if the forks didn't bend, you're bending frames. You know, it'd be a much bigger problem. So anyway, I do see, you know, maybe they clipped a tree, a car, or whatever it is, and it will generally bend a fork leg, and it'll generally bend it right underneath the lower triple.
Okay.
And it's really hard to see. It'll just bow a little bit, and the handlebars will be crooked, you know, and it'll be tracking dog leg down the road. So
So
anyway,
I assume just like anything else, you're going to notice it more on the blacktop. Off-road is a bit more forgiving.
Yeah,
so
sure.
a test ride on blacktop would probably be recommended to check for any pull or anything like
absolutely. And new, you know, that's an expensive component.
Yep.
And so yeah, that's something to consider. But yeah, just to kind of quickly run down the list and not focus, you know, too much on one thing, because these things are reliable.
Yep.
And there's just not any one thing that goes wrong on them. I'd say as far as engines go, we only ever see one failure out of the engines, and it's not that there's a defect or anything like that. It's from lack of maintenance and or
backwards filter or wrong filter.
Well, yeah. So yeah, if you put the wrong filter in, it cooks the cam and the head. So now you need a head and a cam. We sell a lot of those things. That's a common problem. But you know, that's operator error. As far as the engine goes, you have to stay on top of your valve lash. If the motor sounds clattery up top, you know, you're hearing, you know, sounds like the typewriter up there, you know, you're hearing a lot of valve lash. You know, that's an indication that the owner didn't stay on top of the valve. Obviously, they're selling it to you with a lot of valve lash, so they weren't staying on top of it. And what happens, the excessive valve lash just beats the bottom of the adjuster to death, beats the top of the valve to death, and mushrooms the top of the valve, and then it ends up coming loose from the retainer. They drop valves, break the valve guide. You know, it ends up being a wreck, all because they didn't stay on top of their valve lash. So we see a lot of that. So that's something to listen for, you know, and talk to the seller about their valve lash and oil change intervals and things like that. And we mentioned about checking the dates on the tires. You mentioned checking the, you know, looking at the air filter. You know, is it full of, you know,
it's usually a pretty good indicator of whether or not they've maintained something.
Yeah. And if it was full of dirt dauber nests, you know, you may have something that's been sitting around a long time. And you know, obviously that's not the end of the world, but it's just something to consider.
A little yellow flag.
Yeah. And then, you know, we find them all the time with no titles. You know, it's just some, you know, well, we never even tagged it, you know, ever.
Yeah.
So okay, but without a title, it's it's like the logbook on the airplane. You know, it's an ordeal to get a title reproduced. Okay. It's a big order, and it's a big expense. It takes a long time. It's a lot of headache. So.
Yeah. One of the two I bought didn't have a title, and I think I paid $800 or $900 less for that one. But yeah, ultimately I decided to sell it rather than go through that process. So.
Well, so we're applying for a title right now through the state of Arkansas for one. Same deal, 22 model and no title, you know. So, but it's a. I've been doing it for 6 or 7 months. Still don't, you know. It's just, you know, the application process for a title is pretty long. Okay. And you know, if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's, they kick it back. I'm now on my 3rd mailing back to the state of a stack of papers this high.
Yeah, I think that varies by state, but that is a good, you know, don't underestimate the pain that it can be, you know, buying something without a title.
It drastically hurts the value.
Okay. Anything clutch related? I guess obviously just basic operation and make sure it's not slipping, or I guess how often do you see them with burnt clutches? Or,
you know, the only clutch complaints that I see or hear of are on new bikes. You know, that's a huge, and if you look on the forums and the Facebook groups and things like that, a new T-Dub or even one that's a few years old, but it's all about the low mileage. When you're looking at bikes that are only, you know, a few hundred miles or whatever it is, they generally have a lot of complaints with the clutch engagement and the clutch feel, and I get a lot of phone calls about that. What can you do about this clutch? Well, we you know, developed the hydraulic clutch, which kind of masks, you know, the inconsistent feel and things like that. But I'll also be honest with them and tell them, if you can just put up with it and ride the bike, it will go away. It'll feel like all the rest of them after everything seats and wears. Okay. You know, and so it's only on those new bikes that you really have a complaint with the clutch.
Okay. What about the exhaust rotting out at all, maybe, or maybe the older ones, or?
Well, not in Arkansas. Maybe, yeah. No, I do get a lot of phone calls from people up north, you know, wanting to know if we have any pull-off exhaust. I brought one to this ride for somebody. Okay. Yeah, that's something to consider. Start it, listen to it, you know. Now, the deal is, if you're not familiar with the bike, you don't really know what it's supposed to sound like. Right. But it will be obnoxious if it's got a rotted out muffler. Okay. The other thing worth mentioning, because I'm looking at it, is I would say on average, now this could vary, obviously, the stock chain is probably a 2,000 mile chain. You know, if you're just judging by mileage.
Good riding and good adjustment.
Yeah, at the most. So
last year's ride, we rode about 8 hours in rain and sand, and that was eye-opening for me how fast, you know, once you take the lube off the chain. I think we had 4 derailments and 11 adjustments or something like that last year in an 8-hour ride. So
and it was raining, and we stopped in the woods in the middle of the rain, and Tater and I jumped out with wrenches and had to go down the whole line and put chains on and tighten them and adjust them. Yeah, and it took, gosh, an hour,
Yeah.
you know, to do 20 bikes.
Yeah, we had one
Yeah.
wrapped up in the front chain case, and yeah, quite the recovery there.
Yeah. So anyway, the
Yep.
chain maintenance, you know, it tells the tale.
Yeah.
Again, it's all part of the overall condition. You know, does the customer think it's okay, or not the customer, but the seller?
Yeah.
Does he think it's okay that the chain is
Yeah.
is worn out and floppy? You know, it may be an indicator that he felt like it was okay for everything else to be worn out and sloppy
Right.
as well. So.
So to kind of recap, if you look at something, you know, the oil is at a good level, it's clean, air filter looks decent. You know, if the tires are in date and not worn, the chain, like you said, that's probably a replacement item on, even on a new bike if you plan on putting any miles on it.
Yep.
And then listening to the valves, which even properly adjusted, these aren't necessarily quiet motors. So that's, you know, I'm sure you can listen to one in your sleep and know, hey, yeah, it's out of adjustment. But the average guy, that might be kind of challenging because they aren't, you know, sewing machines to begin with, even when they're adjusted right. But
and there's always going to be odd things that we haven't covered. You know, a lot of people, and again, especially up north, they, you know, they're looking for rust in the gas tank. You know, there's, is the carburetor gummy? You know, a lot of times we're buying bikes from individuals that say, hey, it ran when we parked it, but it's as is where it is. We don't want to mess with it. You know,
it's been there 7 years.
Yeah, right. You know, the bike's probably fine, but it probably is going to have a carburetor.
Yeah.
You know, and but it needs to be inspected and gone through, and you're taking that risk.
Right.
You know, so the other thing is, how well do you feel like you can trust the seller? I mean, you know, when you're talking to somebody, if you feel like they're shady and you know, or they're just withholding information, and you're not getting the warm and fuzzy about, you know, do I feel good about this? But then, you know, again, if you're buying one from the original owner and he's like, hey, I bought this, and then, you know, shortly after I, you know, fell off a ladder, got hurt, you know, wife told me I needed to sell it. You know, when you get the story and you understand, you know, I would just feel a whole lot better about the purchase, obviously. So.
Cool. Well, Brad, I certainly appreciate the time. You know, like you said, they're fairly bulletproof, and there's some things, you know, regardless of whether you're buying a car or a T-dub, some common sense things to look at. But you've touched on some unique and specific things, so I certainly appreciate the time, and look forward to riding with you today, riding with you tomorrow, all that kind of stuff. So good times. Thanks again.
Yes, thanks, Bill.
All right.
Appreciate everybody that came out, and thanks to you for having us.
Yeah.
And thanks for all your subscribers and the people that support us. We couldn't do it without them. So.
Yep. Appreciate everything. Thanks again.
Thanks for watching the video to this point. Here's a T-Dub buyer's inspection checklist. Oil, color, cleanliness, level. Are there any engine oil leaks? Does the owner have oil change records? Is the air filter clean, not torn? What is the condition, type, and dates on the tires? Does the title VIN match the VIN on the T-Dub? What is the age and condition of the battery? Do the throttle, clutch, brakes, cables all appear to be functioning and in good condition? Does the electrical switchgear and lights and horn all work? Does the wiring look like it's been molested at all, or is it in good condition? Does the frame appear straight? Does it have any cracks? Is there any welding on the frame? Is it the stock chain on the bike? Is the chain dry, or is it well lubricated? Is it adjusted properly with approximately 1 3/8 to 2 3/8 of slack? Are the sprockets worn? How much adjustment is left on the snail adjusters on the rear axle? Were you able to cold start the bike, and if so, how did that work? Or did the owner already have the bike warmed up before you arrived, which could be a tell? Are the fork tubes straight? Are there any apparent fork seal leaks? Does the bike track and turn true on pavement? What is the age and level of the gas in the tank? Are the body panels cracked, seat torn, tank dented? What's the overall condition of the bike? When the bike is warmed up, does it run well? And does it go through all the gears smoothly? Is there engine noise? Does the owner have any valve adjustment records? Do the brakes operate properly? And on 2001 and newer bikes, does the front disc and brake pads look to be in good condition? What's the mileage on the bike, and are you comfortable with that mileage given what you've been able to learn about the maintenance history? Does the speedometer and odometer work properly? Are there any modifications, and if so, are they done with quality parts and done right? And are they modifications you might have done to the bike anyway? Does the kill switch and kickstand switch properly operate? Is the owner willing to share any history of issues they've had with the bike? Are there any stock or modified extra parts that come with the bike? Do you have everything, assuming you decide to purchase the T-Dub, signed in terms of bill of sale, title, or registration? Be especially wary if the bike is not running. It could be something as simple as needs a new battery, perhaps a carb clean, or it could be an unscrupulous owner used the wrong oil filter without the 4 holes and seized the head and the cam. So buyer beware if you're buying a bike that's not running. We're going to wrap this video up. Appreciate you checking out the entire video. This is B-Dub on a T-Dub. Like I always say, keep your 2 tires dirty.